Welcome to Idea Talks, a Unite podcast focusing on topics related to inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. Here we discuss how we can create better work and study environments for everyone at our universities. I'm Roh Petas from KTH Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm. My pronouns are they, them, and I'll be hosting this episode. I'm also producing this episode of Idea Talks together with Carla Boura from the University of Lisbon. Today, we'll discuss sexual harassment. This is something that we, through numerous studies, know is a problem in the academic sector and in society as a whole. In this discussion, we'll focus on what sexual harassment is and what we can do to prevent it. And to do exactly that, we have two fantastic guests here at Idea Talks, Nuno and Hanna. I'd like to ask you to present yourselves to our listeners. And Hanna, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Hanna. I'm a strategist and a colleague of Roh at KTH, and I work at the KTH Equality Office as a strategist in issues regarding gender equality, diversity, and equal conditions. So I work both on a strategic level and also operational. So doing everything from helping out with upper management and their strategic work on a policy level, but also on the operational level, like conducting trainings and leading workshops and so on. And I have a background in social and gender studies.
Thank you. And Nuno,
Hi.
Who are you?
Hi, hello. Thank you for the invitation and for having me here. My name is Nuno Cunha Rolo, and I have been a civil servant for 25 years. I currently work as a senior legal advisor at the Instituto Superior Técnico, part of the University of Lisbon. And for the past 15 years, I've specialized in the instruction of inquiry and disciplinary processes, handling over 200 cases, more than 200 cases related to alleged and effective violations of the applicable laws, ethics, and good conduct within the institution, including harassment cases.
Great. Thank you to both of you for agreeing to have this discussion with us in the Unite community. And to start off, I think it's important that we all get a clearer understanding of what we're actually discussing when we talk about sexual harassment. So my first question to the both of you is, how would you define sexual harassment?
Okay. Well, harassment is a global phenomenon that crosses cultures, classes, genders, ages, ethnicities, all entities, public, private entities. So, it is there is a kind of a consensus regarding the regulation in Portuguese in the Portuguese case. So is usually the current legislative framework. Harassment is understood notably that based on the discriminatory factor practice when assessing employment or assessing or in a work condition or in a workplace with the aim of a purpose or effect of disturbing or embarrassing the person, affecting their dignity or creating an intimidating, hostile, degrading or humiliating or destabilizing environment. So it is quite consensual regarding the legislation, the regulation in labor codes or in other in the codes of conduct also. But it's not. But it's well. There is some in some cases there is some discussion about what some problems of the definition in the practice way. For instance, one of the problems is if it is required just one single action or behavior, or it is needed a repetition of them. So the polemic is more discussed on the moral harassment rather than the sexual one, because harassment is often a pattern of repeated behavior. But in some cases, it is difficult to see if a single severe incident can also be qualified as harassment. So there is some, in practice, there is some discussion about it. The second one and so the last one is the definition of harassment based on perception. So perception meaning. So and this is not the case of the Portuguese in Portugal overall, because the definition of harassment is more based. The harassment is more based on the intention, the what real was the intention of the behavior of the harasser. So there is, I think these two are the main two problems of the definition of harassment. But besides that, I think in the legislation, in the regulation, it is a bit consensual regarding this meaning.
Yeah, and I think it's a bit tricky actually, because it is, sexual harassment is very much a legal issue, but at the same time, also when we consider the Unite community, for instance, we're a partnership of 9 different European universities from different countries with different legislation. But Hanna, from the Swedish perspective, do you recognize or relate to what Nuno has described from the Portuguese perspective?
Yeah, lots of it. I think in our legislation, if you look at sexual harassment, it's like being exposed to unwanted sexual attention, the unwanted being the main thing here, of course. So it's like conduct that violates someone's dignity in a sexual nature. And I think it's important to address that sexual harassment, at least according to like the Swedish legislation, that we acknowledge the scope. Because when we talk about sexual harassment, a lot of the time maybe we talk about the physical forms, but sexual harassment in a Swedish context could also be anything from looks and comments to then groping and then various forms of physical abuse. I think it's important to acknowledge that there's a wide definition that we have to acknowledge as well, because if we allow the let's say the looks and the comments, and that can also escalate, because that means that if that's okay, then maybe the next step is also okay. And I think it's interesting from a Swedish perspective. You look at it's me as a victim. I'm the one that gets to determine if I'm being sexually harassed or not, basically. So it's not the purpose of the perpetrator, so to speak. It's how maybe the intent was not at all to sexually harass, but that's the way I perceive it, and therefore that can then count as sexual harassment. And the important thing is there that I address and say, like, you're touching my arm, I don't want you to do that. But like, if there are more severe cases, of course, you don't have to express that, because that should then be just commonly understood. But it's interesting to hear the differences also in the legislation. But I think it's important to talk about the width.
I think in your case, the impact matters, and I think in the Portuguese regulation, the context, it's more a flexible, I would say, approach, because it matters the context, it matters the behavior, and it's not how the behavior. It's not enough to evaluate if how the behavior was was perceived by if it was perceived as abusive or not. It counts also the and mainly the what was the intention of the
the intent
of the harasser, and if it was a voluntary act or not. So, but yeah, that I think the critical points here of the meaning related to the meaning of the harassment and sexual harassment. I think that's one of the main points that we discuss here in the Portuguese case.
And sexual harassment is, as we already touched upon, it's a complex and a broad phenomenon with both the legal aspects, but also different expressions. I guess you could say that there's a range or a continuum of different kinds of sexual harassment. But often when we discuss sexual harassment, it is framed as something that men do to women. I'm wondering, is it that clear cut, and are all women equally affected, or do we need to broaden our understanding of sexual harassment?
Well, if I could just look from a Swedish perspective, I'd say it's definitely not clear cut. I would say some groups are more exposed than others, and I mean sexualization can look different depending on things as your race, your sexuality, disability, and so on. And I think we have a Swedish studies that show that the most vulnerable groups are, for instance, young LGBTI people and youth with disabilities are more prone to being exposed to sexual harassment and violence. And we also have a report from KDH that shows that our most vulnerable group are female PhDs, for instance. So it's definitely not like a one size fits all. And we also see, of course, that men are also exposed to sexual harassment, but not to the same extent as women.
In the Portuguese case, I believe it might happen in Portugal. Most of the cases are framed from something that men do to women, but it's just partially true, because I think the reality is far more complex and more nuanced. Both in Portugal, and not so only in Portugal, but also globally. But there is specifically in the Portugal case, there is a predominance of male perpetrators and female victims. But it is not exclusivity male to female. Men can also be victims of sexual harassment, particularly in environments where they are in the minority and or where power is abused, like LGBTQ community or individuals, including transgender people are often disproportionately targeted and highlighted with the harassment behaviors. But harassment is not solely about gender, but also about power, about sexual orientation, about identity. So, overall, I guess I believe that universities and workplaces here in Portugal are increasingly implementing anti-harassment policies, but these are not yet universal or equally effective, in my opinion.
No, I mean, we unfortunately have a very long way to go yet. Yeah. So, like, speaking of studies, there was this UNICEF study done in Europe in the academic sector, and the results there were that 31% of the respondents, so almost 1 out of 3, have been subjected to sexual harassment. And in a national Swedish study that was done a few years ago, also in the academic sector, there were very clear results that sexual harassment is a problem in the academic sector. And maybe we could take this as an opportunity to focus the discussion a bit more on the specific academic sector. And my question to you is, are there or how is sexual harassment expressed in academia? You already mentioned, Hanna, that female PhD students are an especially targeted group, but is there anything else that we can see?
Well, I think I actually, Nuno, do you want to come in and add on?
Well, Portuguese higher education institutions, including private and public and private higher education institutions and research units, received 218 reports of harassment between 2019 and 2023. So, including reports of moral and sexual harassment. And situations that include both. So, and these two types of harassment. And there were 94 disciplinary proceedings open during this period, resulting in the 39 disciplinary sanctions. But these results came from a study because there was some kind of the Portuguese government, especially since 2017, 2018, there were a lot of reports, kind of scandals, academic scandals regarding these issues. So and there was implemented a study, but the survey that was used only the data is limited because only 2/3 of the institution responded to the survey. So that's a kind of a limitation in this data.
Yeah, I mean, we had a big national Swedish study conducted at 38 of the higher education institutions, and those results were interesting, I think, in several ways, because when they asked a question of, have you, like, in the past 12 months been subjected to sexual harassment, 4% of the respondents stated that they had been, which is a rather, quite a low number, but I think that's very interesting when we talk about sexual harassment. What questions are we asking? In what way do we ask the questions? Because the study did both. They asked like that direct question, but they also had this way of breaking down sexual harassment in types of behavior, and they then removed the time frame and asked, like, have you been exposed to any of these behaviors? And then all of a sudden, instead of 4%, 38% of the respondents had experienced one of those behaviors at least once. So I think that's a really important thing when we ask about sexual harassment. In what way do we ask? Just like I said in the beginning, not everyone knows what can actually count as sexual harassment. Like this colleague that always stands too close to me, how do I even know that I can actually call her out on that and say, hey, that's like, I'm not okay with this. This could be actually sexual harassment. So I think that's one of the most important things we can do if we want to investigate. That's to have that clear definition and remind people what can that actually entail. So I think that's really interesting. And what we saw then from that national study is that we could break out the data that was specific for KTH. And we could see the most common behaviors reported that was asking questions about the person's private life, or staring, or making comments about the person's appearance or age. in an uncomfortable manner. So that was the most common. But when we used that data from the national study, we could also see that the situation was worse for women at KTH in comparison to the sector as a whole in some cases. So for instance, 14% of women at KTH report like experiences of someone touching them in an appropriate manner, physically, like grabbing, holding, kissing, hugging, or caressing them. And this is a higher percentage compared to results for the sector as a whole, which was 6%. So the figures are a lot higher on a KTH level. So I think that's it's interesting.
Yeah, and I can only agree that it's very important with this awareness, both in sort of like having this understanding of what is sexual harassment, so that you know that you can seek help, but also with the legal aspects of knowing what your rights are, that you have a right not to be subjected to this kind of treatment.
Yeah, I think that sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, go.
But
Please.
I think that's the bright side, if I may, so if I can call it that, the bright side of this problem. It's the greater awareness and the greater regulation of the harassment. Not in almost all universities, or Portuguese universities. And the recognition also among many people that because they have experienced situations where similar or maybe identical to those being reported, but there is a lot of room to improve, and a lot of policies to implement, and there is a quite deficit of implementation. It's huge here in Portugal, and the internal policies, because there is some problems, as in other issues, also, that when the law mandates the entities to implement the law, the codes of conduct, or something that is mandatory, but the thing is, the culture of do nice to have, and kind of a greenwashing, and it's just and the culture of compliance, of real compliance, not just put forward the documents and put it in the web page of the institution. That's not enough. So there is a lot of problems. Starting from these points, it's we can discuss.
Yeah, and then I'm thinking this is a good segue into the last part of our discussion, because now we've talked about what is sexual harassment and how is it expressed, and that clearly it's a big problem. But then the question is, what can be done about it, and also what is already being done. So I would love to hear some examples from your respective institutions of higher education. What is the kind of work that is being done to prevent and combat sexual harassment? Nuno, would you like to start?
The greater awareness and the greater regulation that have been put in place, and some strategies, but national strategies, not an harassment or a moral sexual harassment strategy specifically, but within other national strategies, like the digital rights, the Charter of the Digital Rights, because of the cyberbullying and all the online harms that could be they are severe problems, and it is increasing, especially in the universities. The cyberbullying and online harms are increasing a lot. But at university level, University of Lisbon, there is the code of conduct to prevent and fight the harassment at the university. There is a code of conduct also to the good practices. There is also a whistleblowing channel and a student ombudsman also, which is not the main focus is not of the harassment issues, but the rights of the students, but can inform or advise the student how to report some misbehaving. But essentially, there is this kind of culture and practice, which is to adopt the documentation, which protects and establish and sets out the rights, some channels, some mechanisms to protect the students and also the workers, the staff, teachers, non-teachers. But it's important, but there is a lot of problems that are related to, like there is a lack of studies and data. That's a problem, because we need data to evaluate, to regulate better, to sanctionate the misconduct. There is also a lack of public disclosure and information. And there is also a lack of human and technical and financial resources that are needed for this to deal with these issues. So I think we have the documentation. Recent studies and reports suggest that practically all higher education institutions here in Portugal have a code of conduct for preventing harassment and reporting channels, because it's mandatory. But however, in 1/3 of the institutions, the code does not cover. For instance, just an example, the code it does not cover the entire academic community. So that's a problem. And other problems also.
Thank you. I mean, it is very important to have, on one hand, like a clear understanding of what is the problem or what is the situation that we're working with, but having these kinds of code of conducts and other steering documents is really something that we can lean back on to use as tools as well. But then it is, of course, important that they're actually used and not just adopted. But Hanna, I'm interested in hearing, or if you could share a bit about the work that we do at KTH, where you mentioned when you presented yourself, like working both strategically and operationally, and that obviously also is something that we do when it comes to sexual harassment. And one concept that is used at KTH is active bystander. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's doing the preventive work is so important to of course prevent anything happening, but talking about how to be an active bystander is to encourage and empower both students, I'd say, and people working here to act when they see something that feels not okay. And I mean, now we're talking in a context of sexual harassment, but it basically means empowering and training people so that they can intervene if they see something or hear something that doesn't feel okay. And so that in that theory of active bystandership, it includes like the awareness of like, how can you recognize a situation as inappropriate, for instance, and how can I understand that I have a responsibility to act. And it's also about equipping individuals with actual practical tools, like how can I actually do it? What do I do? And also encouraging empathy for the victim, the person being exposed, and like daring to do something, even though I'm a little scared of judgment or social repercussions. Or if I'm actually making a mistake, maybe the situation isn't a bad situation. So it's about like in this situation at KTH, we work with both students and employees in this, but then currently we're working with the student union to implement an initiative called Dare to Care. And that's together with RFSU, the Swedish Association for Sexuality Education. So that's an NGO here in Sweden. And this concept was designed primarily for music festivals before and clubs. And now we're like the first university that are implementing this in a strategic long-term sort of way. Like how can we adapt this to a university context? And this like one aspect is training students and staff. Like how can we create events that are safe in general? How can we create safe cultures? But mainly it's also talking about how can I be an active bystander, which means like if I think about it, it increases the chances of me actually acting. So if I think about what would I do if I experienced a situation where someone was being like, if I'm unsure, I think maybe someone is being sexually harassed here. If I get a chance to think it through and reflect with others, that increases massively the chance that I will actually do something. So we have like a 6-step list of what to do that we go through with students, and we train students to then we call it train the trainers, so that themselves then can go out and train fellow students into this, so that we can together like create a culture where it's nice and good to care. Because if you go up to someone and say like, is everything okay, and just making sure, then many people are maybe afraid that they're going to be like, you know, met in an offensive way, but most people think it's very nice. Oh, that's so considerate of you. Thank you for asking. We're fine, but thank you so much. So it's a lot of like just the sheer practicalities. What do you do in a situation where you think something might be off? And that helps people a lot by actually daring to then take that step and do something. So that's a concrete example of how we can use our codes of conduct and our policy documents and turning them into action. Because I think a lot of times to make people actually do something is you actually have to talk it through step by step. What does it actually mean in reality, in an actual situation? What can I do? So that's basically how we encourage people to be active bystanders.
And I think it's important also how we mentioned that it's something that that when we work with this, it's something that involves both staff and students, and also working together. Because it is a shared environment in our universities and institutions where the work and study environment often merges. And of course, there's also problems with not just between staff and between students, but also between staff and students. But with the active bystander concept, I think for many people, it would be sort of awkward or difficult to ask. But as you said, often it can be something that's appreciated.
Yeah, definitely. And I think an important thing now is to talk about sexual harassment, but this, to be an active bystander, this applies for any kind of situation. If you experience someone being exposed to racism or homophobia or anything like that, this 6-step kind of thing works regardless of the situation. So I think that's also important that we use it in that way as well.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, so I have to thank Nuno and Hanna again for taking the time to talk with us about this very important topic. And a big thank you also to our listeners. We're so happy that you want to learn more about inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. And until next time, please consider what good ideas you got from this discussion. Together, we can make a change.